Hey guys, Andrew Esquire here, and today we're giving you the legal mindset on DUIs and how to avoid them. That's right, how to avoid a DUI or DWI. Now, what is that? Let's start by talking about what a DUI or DWI is. A DUI stands for driving under the influence. In certain jurisdictions, it might be a DWI, which is driving while intoxicated. We're talking about alcohol here, people. These charges can sometimes both exist in a state. Sometimes a DWI, for example, in Texas, applies to underage people who have any amount of alcohol in their system, and DUI applies to anyone who has over the legal limit. For example, in Texas, there's both DWIs and DUIs. A DWI in Texas would be somebody who is underage and has any amount of alcohol in their system, and a DUI would be anyone who has over the legal limit of alcohol in their system. Now, what we want to do is prevent you from getting into these charges, because guess what, people? They are big. Yeah, I'm talking big. I mean, bigger than I am. They can be up to $10, $15, or $20,000 in total costs. We're talking court fines. We're talking attorney costs. We're talking classes you may be forced to take. We're talking re-getting your license if that's something that's required. All of these things add up, and we don't want to put you in that situation. And you also got to remember that that's something you're going to be reporting on your record forever. You're going to have to disclose that you had this particular charge until you're able to get that removed from your record. So you want to avoid it. And the thing is, it is very common, especially for young people, while you're in college, while you're a little bit younger, to end up in a situation where you go to a party, you drink a little bit too much, and you end up driving and getting pulled over by the police. That's just a situation we want to avoid. So today I'm going to give you 5 tips on how to avoid a DUI and what you should do if you get in a position where you're pulled over for a DUI stop. Tip number 1, do not drive. Guys, it is 2020. There's no excuse to drive anywhere in 2020 because we've got this, the smartphone. I know you've got it with you right now. Hey, you may be watching my video on your smartphone. What you want to do is call that rideshare app. Uber, Lyft, hell, even if it's a yellow cab and you want to pay that egregious fee, it's still less than the fees that are associated with a DUI. It is much less. You're going to deal with just that payment, paying that fee and getting where you got to go. If you can get a friend to drive you who hasn't been drinking, get them to drive. I know a lot of times we don't really think about designated drivers anymore, but you should always be thinking how you're getting back. If you can walk home, go ahead and do that. One thing I will mention though, is that you can get stopped for biking while intoxicated or for using an electronic scooter. So now that you see all these electronic scooters, these razor type things out in the street, if you're on one of those and you're intoxicated, you can still be stopped and given a citation. So you shouldn't operate any sort of vehicle if you've been drinking. Tip number 2, do not commit a traffic infraction. If you do not commit any traffic infractions, the police have no excuse to stop you initially. When you're stopped, you're initially stopped because you're speeding, because you swerved into a lane, because maybe you've made a turn when you shouldn't make a turn, or you haven't signaled, your plate's expired, your registration's expired. If you take care of all those things, you make sure everything is in order and you are obeying the law, there's no reason the police can pull you over. They can't detect you've been drinking. Don't commit the infraction. Don't do it, and you won't be stopped in the first place. Tip number 3, and this is important for any situation where you're dealing with the police, and what is that? Do not talk. Now, the most important thing in an engagement is not to talk to the police. You're required to give them your license, to give them your registration. If they ask you whether you have any weapons, you can say, no, officer, I do not. But that is about it in terms of what you're required to give them. Now, this can vary a little bit in state to state, but in general, all you have to do is give them that license and that registration, and then you can shut up. They may ask you a question like, where have you been tonight? How many drinks have you had? You're under no obligation to say that. In fact, the reason why they're asking that is to get evidence, to get that probable cause in order to get you out of the vehicle and further test and evaluate you. But if you simply hand them your license and registration, what do they got? Now, they could say, if you start speaking, that they smell it on your breath. But the less you say, the less chance they're gonna have to prove that they smelled that on your breath. Now, another thing is, if there's anything in plain view, that could be a problem. So if you've got open beer bottles in your back seat, that could be something that could lead to giving them that probable cause. So once again, make sure everything is in order. Now, if a police does give you a lawful command, if they, for example, tell you to step out of the vehicle, please obey that. That's important no matter where you are. But that does not mean you have to speak. Another important thing you should always remember when interacting with police is asking them, am I detained or am I free to go? If they're actually detaining you, you get that on the record that they're keeping you there and you're not free to go yet. But in most cases, you are free to go. They're just trying to attempt to ask you more questions. So that's a very important part of it. Now, tip number 4, say no to tests and searches. If the officer asks, do you mind if I look around your car? You can be polite about it. You can say, I'm sorry, officer, I know you're doing your job, but I do not consent to searches. One more time, guys. I do not consent to searches. You don't have to. That is your right under our Constitution. It's a constitutional, fundamental right for you to refuse these searches. So don't give them that reason, because chances are they're gonna pick through your car and find something that they're gonna be able to have reason to further examine you. For example, let's say a receipt from the bar, or maybe a receipt from the liquor store, or they see like a bottle cap or something else that gives them more suspicion. So just don't give that to them, guys. Say no to the searches. The other thing you can do is say no to the tests. Now, this does vary state to state, and in some states, it may be the case that you might, let's say, lose your license or have a temporary suspension of your license. But in most cases, when you look at even the threat of suspension of your license versus the charge of a DUI and the fine and potential criminal charges associated with that, it's better to go the option of refusing those preliminary tests. Tests like reciting the alphabet backwards, standing on one leg. Those are hard for even people when they're sober. Heck, my balance is so bad, I'm lucky if I can ever stand on one leg. But the officers are trained in these tests. They do them over and over again. They make them seem simple, like anybody could do it. All they're gonna do is make you look bad. So unless you've been spending your life practicing field sobriety tests, I would recommend you say no to these tests. You should also say no to the preliminary breath test if they offer this. If they say, look, just blow into this preliminary breath test, a small little breath monitor on the road, blow into this. If it registers low, we'll let you go. Just say no. You're not required to do that. Now, if they eventually get you down to the station, they can take your blood and urine at some point, but let them get you to that point. Let them take you all the way down. In most cases, you're not required to take anything but the official test at the end. And that brings me to tip number 5, which is hold out as long as possible. If the officers take you to the station, if they go through all the processes and they take you to the station, hold out as long as possible for doing or submitting to anything. Now, check your jurisdiction, because this is a thing that varies most from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And as I said before, refusing a test can result in the revocation of your driver's license based on particular state law. But in some states, you're allowed, for example, to call an attorney. So if you're given the opportunity to call an attorney, for example, in North Carolina, take that time to call that attorney. Make sure it's an attorney who specializes in DUI so they can advise you properly. Somebody who does DUI and knows DUI in your particular state. Take that time. Take as much time as they need before you have to do what you have to do. Once again, they are at one point able to take your blood and urine, but until they get to that point, make them get there. Because once again, time is passing. You are sobering up. So make them spend that time. Once again, guys, my primary recommendation goes back to tip number 1. Do not drink and drive. But if you follow all these steps, you should put yourself in the best position to avoid this most common of charges. Guys, stay safe out there. It's the holiday season. I'm wishing all of you the best for Christmas, for New Year's. And if you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. That is the best holiday gift you could give me. But until next episode, this episode is adjourned.